Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. UFC 313 takes place this Saturday at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. And while it is not the most stacked card on paper, I am extremely excited for this card, and I will be doing a full live companion from start to finish, okay? But for this video, I want to give my full card picks, predictions, and breakdowns for every fight on this card, starting with the first fight of the night and working our way up. So like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us get started with the first fight of the night, which is Jordan Santos versus Ozzy Diaz. Okay, now I'm going to be going with Santos for this one, who is a slight favorite. This is his UFC debut, whereas Ozzy Diaz is coming off of a knockout loss for his debut against Ming Yang Zhang. Now, I do think that Ozzy Diaz has fought better competition, and by virtue of that probably has a higher quality of experience, okay, despite them having almost the same amount of fights. My problem is that Diaz has been knocked out 3 times. Now, to be fair, 2 of those came to UFC fighters, once on the Contender Series to Joe Pyfer, and then of course his debut that we just mentioned. Diaz only ever gets finished or gets the finish, and considering we've seen his chin cracked a few times, whereas Jordan Santos has not ever been knocked out, and Santos has multiple knockouts on his record as well as multiple submissions, I would lean his way to get a finish in this fight. So I'm going to be going with Santos by KO. Okay, now let's move on to the next fight, which is Marin Santos versus Francis Marshall. Okay, I guess I'm going to be picking another Santos here. I'm a little bit torn on this one simply because of the odds. Okay, Francis Marshall can be an absolute dog, and he is a pretty sizable underdog for this fight. He has had now 4 fights in the UFC, so the level of guys that he's been fighting has been much higher. I think that they have Santos at like a -375, which is a little fucking crazy, okay? He made his UFC debut in his last fight after he won the Ultimate Fighter and got a knockout over Con Ofley. These guys are the same height, same reach, very close in age. I'm gonna lean Santos, but again, not overly confident just because of the odds and the fact that Francis Marshall is much more experienced against UFC level competition. But I wouldn't be surprised if Marshall's able to dog it out for a decision win or something like that. Either way, let us move to the next fight on the card, which is Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal. Okay, I'm going to be going with Carlos Leal. These odds are also pretty insane, but I feel like they're much more justified than the previous fight we just went over. So I'm going to be picking Leal for a few reasons. Now, Alex Morono has been turning in completely lackluster performances as of late, okay, against guys that are good but not really top flight competition. That fight with Nico Price was absolutely fucking atrocious. I still can't believe that that was on a pay-per-view main card, and the D-Rod fight was not all that great either. He seems to have slowed down quite a bit. Not that he was super fast or anything like that before. That's one of his attributes, actually, is Alex Morono has very strange timing on things, almost like he's throwing change-ups. Also, he's an unorthodox fighter in general. But when we look at Carlos Leal, okay, now it's going to be interesting to see if he's maybe a little less juicy this time around. He took a short notice fight against Rinat Fakhretdinov and, you know, got fucking robbed. Okay, got robbed, completely robbed. But I will acknowledge the guy had tons of acne all over his body and was not around long enough, at that time at least, to be drug tested significantly. So he did appear to be a little juiced up, okay? Regardless, I still think he beat Rinat Fakhretdinov. So unless he has undergone like a Johnny Hendricks type transformation due to being in the UFC longer and getting tested a bit more, I don't see him losing this fight to a very long in the tooth Alex Morono. Okay, now let's move on to the next fight, which is Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. So I'm going to hesitantly go with Armen Petrosyan here. Okay, now his record is not great. He's like 8-4, which is, I mean, we're approaching female records, but I do think on the feet he is much cleaner than Bruno Ferreira. He's got wins over decent guys, including a shared opponent in RoboCop. But I also, you know, That performance against Christian Leroy Duncan was quite good as well. That's what comes to mind when I think of Armin Petrosyan. Rodolfo Vieira, I feel like, was a bad stylistic matchup. And his last loss to Shara Magomedov, he was having some levels of success against Shara before, obviously, that crazy double spinning back fist. So I think he should be able to use his kicking game to maintain a safe distance. Now, Bruno Ferreira is kind of a fucking marauder, and he's on the shorter side of that division, so he knows he's got to get in close. But I think overall he's fought lesser competition, and I don't put much stock in him knocking out someone like Phil Hawes. Okay, if you can't knock out Phil Hawes and you're in the UFC, what the fuck are you doing? So the only thing I'm concerned about, Petrosyan has not gotten a finish since his fight on the Contender Series in 2021. So I don't know that he gets a finish here, and that means that he's gonna have to not get caught for the full 15 minutes, which that's why I'm hesitantly picking him. And like I said, Bruno Ferreira, he's explosive and can fucking crack. So I'm gonna lean Petrosyan by decision. Now let's move on to the next fight, okay, which is Joshua Van versus TSURUYA, or I don't know. I'm gonna go with Joshua Van for this one, okay? Dude is very fun to watch fight. One of my favorite flyweights to watch fight. Clean striking, tough as fuck, absolute savage, okay? His recent loss to Charles Johnson, I'm not gonna hold against him all that much. I think Charles Johnson's striking is quite good, and he was doing well in that fight up until that point. That's his only loss in the UFC, and he's had 6 fights thus far, so he's 5-1 in the UFC, and he's been fighting pretty decent competition. TSURUYA, on the other hand, 1-0 in the UFC, won his debut against Carlos Hernandez by decision, which is a decent win, though Hernandez has had mixed results in the UFC and has been finished a few times. So I think that Josh has better experience, Joshua Van. I favor his striking over TSURUYA. Now, he has been submitted once before, but that was all the way back in 2021 when he was over in Fury FC. But I think he's made significant improvements to his ground game, his ability to get up and things like that since that time. So I'm going to go Josh Van. It would be nice to see a TKO or something along those lines. Either way, let us move up to the next fight on the card, which is Curtis Blaydes versus Rizvan Kuniev. Dude, I'm hesitant on a lot of these picks. I'm going to go with Curtis Blaydes by decision, I think. I'm picking too many favorites, which I do not like doing. But I do genuinely think that Curtis Blaydes will be able to take him down and just do what Curtis Blaydes likes to do. I swear to God, they're the same person. Now, one thing I'm looking at is Rizvan Kuniev has quite a bit of experience. While his pro record is quite a bit smaller than Curtis, I almost called him Chris again. He's got like 16 amateur fights or something like that. However, a majority of those are over guys with an 0-0 record, 0-0 record. So I don't know how much stock I put into that kind of experience. Okay, he does have quite a few knockouts as well, which makes me a little bit nervous because we have seen Chris Curtis, Chris Curtis Blaydes knocked out 5 times or something like that. But even that stat, okay, we're talking about Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis, Sergey Pavlovich, and Tom Aspinall, all guys who have way more experience than Rizvan Kuniev, way higher level of experience. They're way more established than any of Kuniev's opponents. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Chris Curtis Razor Blaydes by decision. Okay, now let's move up the card to the first fight on the main card, which is Bobby Green versus Mauricio Ruffy. Now, you know what, dude? For shits and gigs, okay? Let's just fucking do it. For shits and gigs, dude, I'm going to throw an underdog pick in here. I'm going to go with Bobby Green, and I'm not confident about this pick, okay? I do think the most likely outcome is that Mauricio Ruffy wins, but let's see if I can rationalize my pick here. I definitely think Ruffy, like I said, more likely to win. Some of these odds are fucking insane, though, and I want to throw an underdog in the mix. So while Ruffy has looked fantastic since he showed up in the UFC, and the Fighting Nerd guys are on an absolute fucking tear right now, I think, the least impressed with Ruffy over guys like Carlos Prates or Kyle Barrio. and John Silva and guys like that, right? Just based on the opponents that he has faced thus far. James Lontop, I'll admit, is tough as fucking all get out, okay? But he has been finished in the UFC by Chris Padilla. He's 0-3 since he's been in the UFC. And I'm not going to put a crazy amount of stock in that win. Also, if I remember correctly, he was starting to fade a little bit in the third round. James Lontop doubled him up on significant strikes in that third round. So he won a 29-28 decision over a guy who's 0-3 in the UFC. Also, if we look at other opponents, Jamie Mullarkey has been knocked out 6 fucking times. He's basically the Phil Hawes of the lightweight division. Okay, he's been knocked out by Haqparast, of course, Ruffy, Mohamed Naimov, Jalen Turner. Now, you could say close to the same amount. You know, Bobby Green's been knocked out close to that many times. I think he's been knocked out 5 times. The problem is it's over a much longer period of time. And of course, way more fights, way higher level competition as well. Guys like Dustin Poirier and shit like that. So, you know, I don't think he's quite as chinny as a guy like a Jamie Mullarkey, for instance, right? The guy has fought and beat way better competition than Ruffy, and while he's probably at the end of his career, or at least getting there, he is tricky to deal with for a lot of guys, okay? The hands down, of course, shots coming from weird angles. He's very quick, got good head movement, trash talking while he's in the cage. I know he stuck his head in a fucking choke against Paddy Pimblett, okay? But aside from that, he has decent grappling. He submitted Tony Ferguson. I don't know, like I said, okay? I'm not overly confident, but I want to pick an underdog. And I do, part of me genuinely believes that Bobby Green could potentially cause problems for Ruffy, okay? Just don't roast me too bad. Now let's move up to the next fight on this card, on the main card, which is, what the fuck, dude? Amanda Lemos versus Iceman Lucindo. Why is this on the main card over a Joshua Van or Chris Curtis Razor Blades? I don't fucking understand it, okay? I genuinely don't even know who to pick here. Lemos is going to be 38 in a couple months, which I think matters less in the women's division, but I still think that it is noteworthy. Lucindo's 23, so there's a 15-year age gap, which is fucking huge, okay? Now, Lucindo's loss to Yasmin Yarugi has not aged very well. Both of them do their best work on the feet. Lemos probably hits a little bit harder than most girls Lucindo has fought, but Lucindo has very high striking defense at 66%. So, you know what? Fuck it, dude. I don't know. I'll flip a coin or something, and I'm going to go with Amanda Lemos, I guess, is what it landed on. So, I'll go with Amanda Lemos. The experience, the fact that age doesn't matter as much in the women's division. She's fought way better competition, beaten better competition, so I don't know. You know, who really gives a fuck if we're being honest? Okay, let's move up to the next fight on the card, which is Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Now, this is a very intriguing matchup to me, okay? Some of these fights, while this card is not huge in name value, I think some of these fights are sleeper fights where the guys might not be as well known, but some of the matchups are quite intriguing, okay? Now, we've got 2 6'3" lightweights, which is fucking crazy, okay? Very rarely, if ever, do these guys have someone of similar length and height to fight. The odds have it at a pick'em, if I'm not mistaken. Jalen Turner has obviously fought way better competition than Bahamondes, even though he's 1-3 in his last 4. They're all against ranked lightweights. Also, Jalen Turner might have a little bit of an fight IQ issue. The Renato Moicano fight, he very well could have knocked him out, okay, but he chose to try and go for the walk-off, so hopefully he has altered some of his decision-making processes, okay? Now, the problem is a lot of Jalen Turner's wins are, and a lot of his best highlights, a lot of his best moments come against guys like Jamie Mullarkey, Brad Riddell, Brock Weaver, of course the Bobby Green knockout as well, but most of these guys are not top tier lightweights. I mean, Brad fucking Riddell, come on. So I'm gonna lean Bahamondes, but I will say if Jalen Turner gets the win, I could see it being by way of submission. Okay, he's got decent chokes and things like that, although they tend to work a lot better against smaller opponents. I'm thinking of the Brad Riddell one, of course. Okay, now let's move on to the co-main event. which is now Justin Gaethje versus Rafael FIZIEV. I had written out a ton of fucking shit for this fight, and then I went back and rewatched the fight last night, and now I'm even more torn than I was before. I felt like I was leaning Gaethje, and I'll explain why. Their first fight was extremely competitive. Gaethje definitely started to get the better of it as the fight got longer, but FIZIEV still had success, even in the opening of the third round, which Justin Gaethje clearly won. Rafael FIZIEV came out, landed good hard body kicks, left hooks, things like he had success for about the first minute. It seemed like that was maybe the end of his explosiveness, though. He kind of emptied the tank at the beginning of the third round, and then Gaethje started to pick it up. My problem with picking FIZIEV right now would be how long it's been since we've seen him fight. Okay, it's been about 1.5 years, I think, since he fought last, obviously coming off that injury against Mateusz Gamrot. So I can't see whether improvements or adjustments have been made, because I've just not seen him in there for so long. On the other hand, though, I am a little bit worried for Justin Gaethje's chin. Okay, obviously got flatlined badly, seizuring against Max Holloway. Even in the Dustin Poirier fight that he won, he got wobbled. He's been dropped by Charles, got wobbled by Chandler, dropped by Tony. Like, it seems as though while he is still Justin Gaethje, his ability to take punishment might be deteriorating. Okay, in their last fight, something I noticed about FIZIEV is a lot of his strikes, especially his kicks, they're thrown with fucking beautiful technique, very fast, very explosive, but he doesn't seem to set things up all that much, and sometimes it looks as though it's like he's just spamming his best weapons, which eventually becomes a bit predictable. Even still, he had success basically throughout the course of the fight. After that first round, you can see the speed and power drop off a little bit. Like in the first round, it was fucking jaw-dropping how fast and loud his kicks were. You could see it start to fade just a little bit. Got a little bit more labored and things like that. Now, he could crack Gaethje with something, and I would not be shocked at all if we saw Gaethje get hurt or knocked out, wobbled badly. But, fuck, man. I truly don't know. Just because I wish we had a fight from FIZIEV to look at in between the Gamrot fight and now, because I just can't see whether or not he's made improvements. And I feel like this happens a lot, where you see a really good fighter like a Justin Gaethje have a bad moment where he gets knocked out brutally, so you're inclined to pick against him in the next fight, and then they come out and remind you. You know what I mean? Dustin Poirier, when he got fucking head kicked by Gaethje, I was like, oh no, his chin's cracked, he's fucked. And I picked him against Benoit Saint-Denis, but I was hesitant to do so. But then he came back and, you know, did what he did. So, fuck, man. Fuck it, I'm gonna go with Rafael FIZIEV. I had picked Gaethje initially, that was who I picked in my notes, but I'm gonna go FIZIEV. He's had time off to recover. We can look at that as a positive. Healed his body and things like that. I'm sure he's been training like a motherfucker as soon as he could once his knee was fixed, and he has taken significantly less damage than Justin Gaethje. Now, something that worries me is we saw FIZIEV landed a lot of clean shots on Gaethje, but a lot of them were to like the jaw or the cheek and things like this, where there's no visible damage that appears. Justin Gaethje does this thing where he punches almost with the inside of his hands, so the gloves are there to scrape you up. And FIZIEV's eye got fucking brutalized in the last one, so that's something that he should keep in mind, is visible damage means a hell of a lot to the judges. So even if you land the cleaner shots on the chin and things like that, if your eye gets fucked the way it did in the first fight, could potentially be bad for you if it goes to the judges' scorecards. I'm gonna go FIZIEV. I'm not confident whatsoever, but regardless, dude, let's move up to the fucking main event. Okay, yes, I will be picking Alex Pereira. Now, I will acknowledge that at least on paper, okay, this is probably his toughest, or at least one of his toughest tests yet. I do think, however, a lot of that depends on Magomed Ankalaev's decision making, which I am not entirely confident in. Okay, I think oftentimes he makes very poor decisions in fights, but either way, let's talk about it a little bit. Even though Magomed is southpaw, and I will acknowledge his ability to check kicks has vastly improved since his fight against Jan Blachowicz. I will also point out a lot of, even most of the kicks, almost all of them that he checks are to the inside leg, which is a bit easier to see coming because typically it's coming off the back leg if you're fighting an orthodox fighter. But also, it's a little bit easier to turn your leg in than it is to pick it up or turn it outward. So there's a few things that go into that. Also, a lot of the guys he has been fighting have way more tell on their kicks than a guy like Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira can kick off of both his rear and his lead leg, pardon me. Both are very, very sneaky. The lead leg little switch kick he does is very sneaky, hard to see coming, very low. And I think he will be able to successfully attack Magomed Ankalaev's outside leg. Something else I've noticed is Magomed is very good defensively, but his defense is a little bit predictable. He really likes to slip to his left, which could leave a few openings and potential setups for a guy like Alex Pereira. Rakic tried to set up a head kick on that side, but his kicks are a lot more telegraphed and not as fast as Alex Pereira's, and there were some that even came close in that first round, at least, where Magomed was able to get one hand up. But if it was an Alex Pereira kick, who knows? Also, when I'm studying or preparing for this fight, I went back and watched some of Magomed Ankalaev's older fights. So I'm reminded of the Thiago Santos fight where he blobbered Ankalaev with a left hook 3 times and ended up dropping him for it. Jan Blachowicz had a lot of success with the left hook as well. That's why after the first round in their fight, see Magomed Ankalaev go into the corner with his right eye all swelled up and bruised. So something Ankalaev does that enables this is he drops his lead hand when he throws a straight left, and he even gets his, and this is a good thing, but it can give your opponent something to work with. When he throws his left hand, he kind of gets his head off the center line to his right, okay? And then, of course, with the drop of the lead hand, while you're throwing your straight left, it leaves you open for a counter. A lot of his best weapons come off of the rear side. So I do think that Alex Pereira could time that counter left hook as well, or even like in the Blachowicz fight, it wasn't a counter. Jan Blachowicz threw a bit of a combination and was able to end it with a left hook. When Santos hurt him initially, Ankalaev just took a knee. You could kind of see him thinking about shooting for a takedown, but he doesn't. He stands back up. And this is an example of what I mean by maybe some poor decision making, okay? While grappling is not his best aspect, a lot of people get confused about this. He's very competent there, but it's not the best part of his game. He chose to stand up instead, and then he got cracked with 2 more left hooks and eventually got dropped. Also, we know that he is susceptible to leg kicks based off that Jan Blachowicz fight, which is why I think Alex Pereira will have success with the lead leg. And Jan Blachowicz has phenomenal leg kicks as well. So, I mean, even Ankalaev in that fight was checking some of the inside leg kicks. It didn't fucking matter. Right? It didn't matter. They were just debilitating. Jan Blachowicz's legs are hard as rock. So, I do see him having success there. He can kick off either leg, like I said. If he can force Magomed to switch, then the rear calf becomes available as well, which is what happened in the Jan Blachowicz fight. He kicked him so many times to his inside leg that eventually, or his lead leg, eventually he had to switch stances. And then Jan Blachowicz just attacked that shit. So, but again, all of this does kind of depend on the decision making of Magomed Ankalaev, whether or not, or rather how fast he will shoot for a takedown. Now, again, his name ends in V, and he's from fucking Dagestan or Russia or whatever, right? But Ankalaev is not primarily a grappler. He has multiple head kick knockouts inside the UFC. He has zero submissions throughout his career, and obviously he got submitted by Paul Craig. Okay, so while he has good control and an ability to just kind of like drag you back down over and over again, a lot of the times up against the fence, and then you'll get to a knee, you think you're going to get back up, and he just kind of drags you back down. But even in the Jan Blachowicz fight, he shot 7 takedowns in the first 3 rounds, and I think he only got 1 of those. And he only got about a minute of control time, and I don't even think that came mostly from the takedown. I think that was like clinched up against the fence. It wasn't until the 4th round where he started to be able to control Jan Blachowicz a bit more. And in the 5th round, he actually went 0-1 on takedowns, but Blachowicz fell to the ground, slipped and fell, and Magomed just kind of followed him there. His takedown accuracy is 31%, and he averages less than 1 takedown per fight, 0.9 takedowns average or some shit like that. Also, in almost every stat, Alex Pereira has higher numbers, right? Higher output, higher strike differential, higher accuracy about his striking by like 11%. Now, Ankalaev's got a higher defense percentage, which is good, but he's not fought a guy with the capabilities on the feet of an Alex Pereira. And also, I think that the fact that his defensive stat is higher than Alex Pereira's, I think that kind of correlates with Alex Pereira's higher output. The more you throw, the more you are opening yourself up to get hit, of course. I think Alex Pereira is much more versatile on the feet, better setups, much better setups, and just a better understanding of striking distance, period. Also, a lot of Magomed's best weapons, well, I'll go back to this a little bit, come from that rear side, like I said earlier. His straight left, his left high kick, things like that. We saw, now, Khalil Roundtree, not as good as Magomed Ankalaev, I will concede, but he's very fast, very explosive, very powerful. We saw Alex Pereira be able to successfully, often as well, slip that left hand and fire back with a counter right hand, which is beautiful the way he does it, okay? In a lot of fights, we have seen Magomed Ankalaev get cracked with right hands back. Jan Blachowicz was able to hit him with counter rights. Rakic even had a bit of success with counter rights and things like that. So, like I said, a lot of this depends on Magomed's decision-making ability. If Alex Pereira has improved his ability to get back to his feet, to defend the takedown even in the first place, and also not get totally fucking annihilated on the ground, if his defense on the ground is better than it once was. And I think that he has probably been working a lot of that. But back to the decision making of Ankalaev, okay, while he, while I said he's not primarily a grappler, he clearly has the grappling advantage here. And so I'm very curious to see if his ego, his pride, is going to allow him to shoot and do that rather than stand, because he is very confident in his striking abilities, or if he can mix up the wrestling to set something up on the feet or something along those lines. But either way, I'm going to go with Alex Pereira by knockout, and I could potentially see a left hook. I could potentially see a high kick of some sort off of the rear leg, perhaps. And I will admit I'm a little bit nervous for this one, okay? I know that Alex Pereira's fan base is quite annoying to a lot of people nowadays, but I have been watching him since Glory, before he was even a champion, and I very much enjoy his style, and I think that he is the best thing to happen to the light heavyweight division in a very long time, maybe even the UFC in fucking general, okay? Either way, appreciate you guys, okay? Like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.